Hi, I'm Maria, and this is the Agile State of Mind. Welcome! Recently, I made a video about refining the refinement, and you can find it in the description below. Brace yourselves, because today you are in for a story. Because how to better explain user stories than with a story? It worked for me. This is the first part of the user story series. I will tell you a story and will try to respond to most common questions about user stories. The next video will be more practical. We'll go from talking about user stories to writing them, and we will learn some tricks that will help us make the stories ready for the next sprint. Scrum Guide doesn't say a word about user stories. So there was a time that I had a lot of questions about them, like, where do I find reliable information about user stories? Should Backlog be composed of user stories only? If I don't use the template as a user I want so that, is it not a user story? And what about stories that say, as a developer, I want, or better yet, as a PO, I want, so that. Let's shed some light on the user stories and clarify some of those misconceptions about them. Plus, I would like to point you to the people that best explain them. Let's start! The story of user stories. I will tell the story of user stories because for me, it was the best way to understand what matters about them and clarify some of the misconceptions. User stories come from the 90s, as do all the best things. Kent Beck started talking about them in his book Extreme Programming Applied. He explained that stories are an antidote to requirements, that are something obligatory or mandatory, and as such, stand in our way to embrace change. The idea came from a story a user told him about a new product. Quotes, I type in a zip code and it automatically fills in the city and state without me having to touch a button. If you can tell stories about what the software does and generate energy and vision and interest in the listener's mind, then why not tell stories before the software does it? Kent asked himself, why can't we generate this vision about the product before we build it? Stories about who will use the product, what it will do, and why. We should have conversations about it to help think things through. Jeff Patton, the author of the user story mapping book that I highly recommend, insists that stories get their name from how we use them, not how we write them. Here we have our first learning. Stories are about talking, not about writing. Then along came Rachel Davis from a company called Connextra, who invented the template many of us use today. And it goes like this. As a user, I want, so that. The template reminds us about the three most important things about the product. Who wants it, what do they want, and why they want it. Put yourselves in the shoes of the user and think about their needs from their perspective. For example, as a mobile phone user, I want to check the weather forecast for my location so that I don't have to look it up every time I go to a new place. I'm a lazy user. Again, what you write down on the card is supposed to be a starting point to drive conversations about the new idea. The concept of the card comes from Ron Jeffries and his 3 C's. Card, conversation, confirmation. You write your idea on a card. Well, that was back in the 90s. Today, we write it in a software tracking tool or on a post-it. And then you have a conversation about it with the people that will build it. Then goes the confirmation. You write the outcome of the conversations in a document, software tracking tool, so you can easily recall the conversation and also know how to verify that the story is done. You can read all about it in Mike Cohn's book, User Stories Applied. Mike Cohn is a great practitioner and expert in the user stories area. I can't recommend you enough going to his website, Mountain Goat Software. You can find all the links in the description below. So we start from Kent Beck's stories, as he described them in the XP, the extreme programming, and arrive at the user stories that we use now. Adding the word user to the stories helps bring our attention to those for whom we are building the product. And this can help clarify why having stories saying, as a developer, I want, or as a PO, I want, as a Scrum Master, I want, doesn't make much sense unless our customers are developers, POs, or Scrum Masters. And that's the story of user stories. It is introducing storytelling to our product creation. Stories can be written down by using the template to make sure you don't miss any of the important part, but it is of course optional. What counts is that the product owner and the development team who will build the product have a shared understanding of what they want to achieve. They should focus on the 3 most important things. Who will use the product, what will they do with it, and why. And with all that, I hope I shed some light on the user stories for you and help you get some ideas on how to use them. So, in the episode number 2 from the series, we will put this theory into practice. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.